culture is quietly shaping who you are becoming. Right now, as you watch this, people react quickly, they critique quickly, they argue quickly. But very few people ever pause to notice what is shaping the way that they think. Think about it. We don't really think about our thinking. We don't really pay attention to what we're paying attention to. We become incredibly critical in our thinking, but we rarely think critically about what's shaping our thinking. And that matters because every day, forces around us are quietly shaping the way we see ourselves, the way we understand the world, and even the kind of people we are becoming. Most of the time, we don't even notice it. Which reminds me of something the psychologist Carl Jung once wrote. He said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. In other words, if we don't become aware of the forces shaping us, we simply assume that the way we think, feel, and react is just who we are. But often it isn't. Often it's culture shaping us, the way we think, the way we feel, the way we see ourselves. And that is what this channel is about. Most conversations about culture today fall in two categories. People either celebrate culture or they criticize culture, but very few people interpret culture. And interpretation matters because culture is not just something we observe, culture is something that forms us, culture impacts us. Every day we're being shaped by the technology that we use, the stories we consume, the communities that we belong to, the institutions around us, and the things that capture our attention. These forces shape our habits, assumptions, values, and our identity. And most of the time, this formation happens quietly and gradually. It happens in the background. We're not even aware that it's happening, which means we rarely notice it. But if we want to understand modern life, if we want to understand ourselves, we have to learn how to see culture more clearly. Because the most important cultural question is not what is happening in our culture. It's a good question. The deeper question is what kind of people is our culture forming us to become? Now, we have an attention problem. One of the most interesting things I've noticed over the years, especially teaching students and observing cultural conversations, is that people rarely pay attention to what they're paying attention to. We react, we comment, we judge, but we rarely step back and ask, why did this story capture my attention? Why does this topic make me emotional? Why do I instinctively agree with one perspective and dismiss the other? It's so easy to see these days. Part of the reason is that modern culture is designed to capture attention first and then reflect on it, if at all. Algorithms reward quick reactions. Social media amplifies outrage. And the speed of digital life trains us to judge first and understand later. So what happens? People begin to form very strong opinions without ever examining the forces that shape those opinions. You see it everywhere. Friends arguing passionately about issues where the logic is inconsistent. Debates driven more by emotional reaction than careful reasoning. People defending positions that align perfectly with the tribe that they belong to, not necessarily logic. And often, the person themselves don't realize this is happening because cultural formation works best when it operates below our awareness. Over time, I've found it helpful to think about culture through five major forces that shape how people think, how they behave, and how they understand themselves. These forces are constantly interacting, and together they form the environment that shapes modern identity. Let's walk through them. Number one, technology. Technology does more than give us tools. It shapes how we think and how we interact. The smartphone alone has transformed how we communicate, how we process information, how long we can sustain attention, how we experience relationships. Technology also subtly shapes our expectations about life. We get used to speed, instant access, constant stimulation, and over time, that changes the way we experience patience, reflection, and even boredom. We don't like being bored. And so our phones keep us busy, and our phones keep us from being bored. Technology is never neutral in human formation. The tools we use eventually begin to shape the habits of our mind. Number two, stories. Human beings are shaped by stories. Stories communicate visions of what success looks like, of what relationships should look like, what happiness should look like, and what a meaningful life looks like. Movies, music, television, social media narratives, these are not just entertainment. Not anymore. They function as moral imagination. They subtly tell us this is what a good life looks like. The more a story is repeated, the more normal it begins to feel. And eventually, these stories begin to shape our expectations about identity, relationships, and purpose. These stories become our stories. Number three, institutions. Institutions shape culture in powerful ways. Schools, families, churches, corporations, universities, organizations, institutions establish norms, expectation, and values. They shape what people believe is important. They shape what people believe is possible. They shape the structures within which people develop identity and meaning. And when institutions change, the culture around them changes as well. Number four, belonging. Human beings are deeply shaped by the communities they belong to. Belonging influences belief more than most people realize. We often assume that people adopt beliefs purely through careful reasoning. But in reality, many beliefs are reinforced because they strengthen group identity. People want to belong, and belonging often comes with shared assumptions about the world. This is why cultural conversations can become so emotionally charged. Because when people feel that a belief threatens their community, it feels like a threat to their identity and who they are. Number five, attention. This might be the most overlooked force of all. What we repeatedly pay attention to shapes what we become aware of and what we ignore. Attention shapes our perception of reality. If someone consumes a steady stream of outrage driven content, their perception of the world will slowly shift. If someone constantly compares their life to curated social media lives, their sense of self will slowly change. I've had tons of conversations with people where this is true. Attention works like a spotlight. Wherever it shines, reality begins to feel larger. And whatever falls outside that spotlight slowly disappears from awareness, which means the question is not simply, what are you thinking about? The deeper question is, what is shaping what you pay attention to? Now, why does this matter? When you begin to see these forces, something interesting happens. You start to realize that many cultural debates are not just disagreement about facts. They're actually collisions between different formation environments, different technologies, different stories, different communities, different patterns of attention. And suddenly, people who seem irrational begin to make more sense, not because they're necessarily correct, but because their formation environment shaped how they see the world. Which is why one of the most important habits we can develop today is cultural awareness. Not just reaching the culture, but learning how to look at the culture and then interpret it and find the meaning in what you're seeing. Learning to step back and ask what forces might be shaping the conversation, what assumptions might be operating beneath the surface, what kind of people are these cultural patterns forming. Those are the things that we need to pay attention to. Now, there are three practices for cultural awareness. If we want to become more aware of how culture shapes us, it requires intentional attention. And here are 3 practices that can help. Practice number 1, notice what captures your attention. Pay attention to what repeatedly pulls you in, what headlines you click, what content you watch, what shows up in your feed, what topics trigger strong emotional reactions. Attention reveals what is shaping your perceptions of reality. The more aware you become of your attention patterns, the more freedom you gain to direct them intentionally. There is an option to turn those things off. Practice number 2, ask what story is being told. Behind almost every cultural trend is a story about what life should look like. Ask yourself, what vision of success is being promoted here? What idea of identity is being celebrated? What definition of happiness is assumed? Stories shape your imagination long before you realize it. And what stories are you paying most attention to? Practice number 3, step back before you judge. One of the healthiest habits we can develop today is interpreting culture before judging it. Curiosity before criticism. Understand before creation. There's a lot of people that jump to criticism, a lot of people that jump to reacting. Now, when you slow down long enough to, to interpret cultural forces, you begin to see things that were previously invisible. Culture is always shaping us every day through technology, through stories, through communities, through our institutions, and through attention. Most of the time, it happens quietly. But once you begin to see these forces, you start to understand the deeper question beneath every cultural conversation. Because the most important cultural question isn't what's trending, it's what kind of people our culture is forming us to become. And that's what we're going to explore on this channel. Thanks for checking this out. If you want more of these conversations, please like and subscribe. And please join us in the conversation. Leave a comment. Let us know what you want us to talk about, and we'll talk about it. And as always, don't forget, be unique, but belong. Thanks for checking this out.